What if the stories in ancient scripture weren't just moral lessons or metaphors, but warnings? Long before the Great Flood, before the Tower of Babel, there was another story, a story hidden between the lines of the Bible, one that speaks of celestial beings who descended to earth, not to guide humanity, but to break the boundaries between heaven and flesh. They were called the sons of God, and they looked upon human women with desire. What followed was a union that defied divine law, a forbidden mingling of the divine and the mortal. From that union came giants, beings of immense power, creatures known as the Nephilim. Born of angels and humans, they were neither fully of heaven nor of earth. And according to ancient texts, their very existence threatened the balance of creation. Some say they were heroes, others say they were monsters, but all agree they were not meant to be. You won't find their full story in most Bibles. You have to dig into the lost books, the Book of Enoch, the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient Mesopotamian tablets. There you'll uncover a world of forbidden knowledge, symbols of secret bloodlines, and echoes of beings erased from sacred memory. Why were they hidden? What truths were too dangerous to preserve? Tonight, we're peeling back the veil. We're diving into a tale of divine rebellion, ancient punishment, and the unholy offspring that nearly ended humanity. This is not just myth. This is the origin of fear. This is the story of the Nephilim. The story of the Nephilim begins quietly in a few cryptic verses tucked within the 6th chapter of Genesis. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Genesis 6:1-2. At first glance, it seems like a poetic aside, but theologians, mystics, and occult scholars have long understood these verses as something far more disturbing, a record of celestial transgression. According to ancient interpretations, the sons of God were not mere mortals or metaphorical children of faith. They were divine beings, angels or watchers, as they would later be called in apocryphal texts. And what they did was not part of the divine plan. They descended to earth, not as messengers, not as guardians, but as rebels. They took human women, not by divine permission, but by desire. They fathered children through them, and those children, the Nephilim, were unlike anything the world had ever seen. They were giants, titans, beings of incredible strength, knowledge, and mystery. But they were also aberrations, hybrids of the celestial and the earthly. They did not belong to the natural order, and their very presence was said to unbalance the world. Many biblical traditions shy away from elaborating on these verses. They leave them vague. But other ancient sources, especially the Book of Enoch, are much more explicit. They name the angels involved. They detail their descent. They describe how the Watchers not only fathered the Nephilim, but also taught forbidden knowledge to mankind: astrology, weapon making, enchantment, seduction. Knowledge that in many traditions was considered too dangerous for humans to hold. This knowledge wasn't simply academic, it was transformative. It gave humanity power it wasn't ready for. It accelerated violence, corruption, and ambition. Civilization began to unravel, and with it, the very foundation of divine order. That's why some scholars argue the flood wasn't merely about human sin. It was about wiping away the Nephilim and erasing what the Watchers had introduced. In occult tradition, this story isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a symbolic narrative of rebellion, hidden power, and the cost of forbidden knowledge. The Nephilim represent a fracture in the boundary between heaven and earth, a moment when the divine crossed into the profane. And that moment, however brief, changed everything. The phrase, "they were the heroes of old, men of renown," adds another layer of mystery. Some say these giants were worshipped. Others believe they became the basis for myths about demigods, like Hercules in Greek legend or Gilgamesh in Sumerian epics. But regardless of how they were remembered, one thing remains consistent across nearly every version of the story. The Nephilim were a mistake. A mistake so great, the Creator was willing to flood the entire earth to undo it. And yet, they weren't entirely erased. Their shadows stretch across history, in symbols, in myths, in whispers of ancient bloodlines. So, who were the Nephilim? Divine beings? Monsters? Martyrs of a celestial rebellion? Their story is just beginning. The Bible whispers about the Nephilim, but the Book of Enoch screams. This ancient text, once considered sacred by early Jewish and Christian communities, was eventually cast out, deemed too controversial, too strange, too dangerous. Today, it survives only in fragments, buried in forgotten languages, and recovered from distant corners of the world. Yet within its pages lies a story far more detailed and far more disturbing than anything found in Genesis. In the Book of Enoch, we are introduced to a group of angels known as the Watchers. They were not evil by design. They were sent to Earth as guardians, meant to watch over humanity. But as the story unfolds, their name becomes ironic, because instead of simply watching, they fell. Led by a powerful figure named Semyaza, 200 angels made a pact atop Mount Hermon. They vowed that if one of them defied the heavens and took a human wife, they would all follow. It was a covenant of rebellion, and so they descended, not as meteors or spirits, but as radiant, terrible beings in physical form. What followed was not just forbidden love, it was the transfer of power. The Watchers taught humanity secrets we were never meant to know. They taught men how to forge swords and shields, bringing war into the world. They taught women the art of makeup and adornment, awakening vanity and lust. They revealed astrology, root-cutting, sorcery, and the signs of the heavens. In short, they delivered the occult. Each angel became a corrupter of mankind, trading sacred knowledge for desire, unleashing chaos in exchange for pleasure. And from their union with mortal women came the Nephilim, giants who devoured the labor of men, then devoured the men themselves. According to Enoch, the Nephilim were not just violent, they were consumers of the world. They turned on humanity, on the earth, on animals, even on each other. Blood filled the valleys. Cries rose from the mountains, and heaven at last responded. The archangels Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel are sent to intervene. God, angered beyond measure, commands the destruction of the Nephilim. The Watchers are bound in chains, cast into the depths of the earth to await final judgment. And the world, it is to be washed clean by a great flood. This narrative, found nowhere in modern Bibles, is a cornerstone of occult mythology. It paints the Nephilim not just as hybrid giants, but as the byproduct of sacred corruption. The Watchers are not cartoon villains, they are tragic figures, punished for loving, for teaching, for stepping outside their bounds. In esoteric circles, some see the Watchers as symbols of divine knowledge lost, power hidden, truth suppressed. Were they really evil, or were they rebels trying to elevate humanity? The Book of Enoch forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. What if the knowledge they gave us, the secrets of the stars, of metal, of ritual, wasn't evil but simply premature? What if the punishment wasn't about sin, but about control? In this view, the story of the Watchers and the Nephilim becomes something more than myth. It becomes a cautionary tale, not about temptation, but about what happens when forbidden truth is unleashed. And perhaps buried deep beneath our modern world, those truths are waiting to be uncovered once more. What happens to a lineage that should never have existed? According to the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim were wiped out by a divine decree. The earth was flooded, their fathers, the Watchers, were imprisoned beneath the mountains, and mankind was given a second chance. But what if it wasn't that simple? Across ancient cultures, scattered among disconnected mythologies, we find troubling echoes, stories of giants, demigods, divine kings with knowledge beyond their time, tyrants with supernatural strength, bloodlines touched by the heavens and cursed ever since. In the Hebrew Apocrypha, some traditions suggest that not all the Nephilim perished in the flood, that some escaped, that their blood was passed down in secret, that the great empires of the ancient world, Babylon, Egypt, Canaan, were not built by humans alone, but by the offspring of forbidden unions. The Book of Jubilees speaks of Rephaim, Anakim, and other giant tribes as remnants of the Nephilim. The Philistine warrior Goliath, possibly one of their descendants. And even the post-flood giants mentioned in Numbers 13, verse 33, were feared because they were said to be descendants of the Nephilim. But this is not just a Hebrew tale. In Mesopotamian myth, we find the Anunnaki, beings from the heavens who mated with humans and created royal bloodlines. In Greek mythology, the Olympians took mortal lovers, giving birth to demigods like Heracles, Perseus, and Achilles. These heroes were powerful, but their stories often ended in madness, tragedy, or divine punishment, suggesting that their blood was both a gift and a curse. Could these myths be distorted memories of the same truth? Occult scholars argue that the Nephilim represent more than literal giants. They symbolize a spiritual contamination, a bloodline infused with knowledge and power that was never meant to be given to mortals. Their influence is not measured only in size or strength, but in ambition, dominance, and disruption. Some occult traditions go further. They speak of bloodlines that persist in secret, protected by ancient rites, passed through royal houses and secret societies. From the pharaohs to the Merovingians, from the Templars to the Illuminati, rumors persist of families who carried the divine spark, the Nephilim flame, hidden beneath generations of shadow. In these circles, the Nephilim are not merely myth. They are the origin of forbidden kingship, and their blood is sought, protected, sometimes even weaponized. Could this explain the obsession with divine right to rule, with sacred blood, with genetic purity in dark moments of history? In esoteric symbolism, the Nephilim become a metaphor for the hybrid soul, part divine, part animal, forever torn between worlds. They are both a warning and a mirror, reflections of what humanity could become if given godlike power without godlike wisdom. And if even a trace of their blood remains, whether literal or symbolic, then perhaps their fall was not the end. Perhaps it was only the beginning. We often think of the Great Flood as a reset, God's response to a world filled with sin, corruption, and violence. But when viewed through the lens of occult mythology, the flood takes on a darker, more precise meaning. It wasn't just humanity being punished, it was just the Nephilim who had to be erased. In Genesis 6:4-7, we're told that God regretted creating mankind and decided to wipe out all living things. But the context matters. The verses that immediately precede this judgment are about the sons of God, the daughters of men, and the giants born from their union. This suggests something chilling. The flood was not merely a response to sin. It was a surgical purge, a divine effort to undo a celestial mistake. According to the Book of Enoch, the world was unraveling because of the Nephilim. They were more than giants. They were abominations, consumers of the earth, devourers of blood, bringers of forbidden knowledge, and chaos. The Watchers had unleashed something uncontrollable. Their children were destroying everything. The earth cried out under their weight. Animals turned unnatural. Humans fell into despair. The balance of creation had been broken, and the only solution was annihilation. So the order came from the highest realms. The Watchers were imprisoned beneath the earth, bound in darkness until the end of days. Their children, the Nephilim, were to be destroyed in body and in spirit. Not just killed, but cut from the thread of reality itself. The flood, in this telling, becomes a kind of divine exorcism, a mass cleansing of spiritual pollution. Water, in nearly every spiritual tradition, symbolizes purification. But here it is not gentle, it is violent, relentless, and total. The Ark of Noah is not just a survival vessel, it's a seed vault, a desperate attempt to preserve what remained of the untainted world. And when the waters finally recede, the world is not reborn, it is emptied, silent, haunted. But even floods leave residue. The Book of Jubilees and other texts suggest that not all the Nephilim perished. Some spirits lingered, some bloodlines endured. In occult belief, the spirits of the Nephilim became what later traditions called unclean spirits or demons, restless, bodiless, seeking form. In this framework, demons aren't fallen angels, they're disembodied Nephilim, wandering in exile, corrupted by origin and cursed by destruction. It reframes the entire theology of evil. The flood did not end the war, it simply pushed it into the shadows. And so the myth of the Nephilim doesn't end with drowning, it ends with transformation. From flesh to ghost, from legend to symbol, from presence to absence. Even today, many ancient cultures retain flood myths. Sumerian, Babylonian, Hindu, Mayan. Each tells of a time when gods or sky beings flooded the world to punish the hybrids, to cleanse the earth of what should not have been born. Coincidence? Or fragments of a shared, buried truth? In the occult view, the flood is not just a historical or symbolic event. It is a warning, encoded in myth, passed down across time. A warning that when heaven and earth mix improperly, when the divine crosses the line without consent, the universe itself demands a reckoning. And next time it might not be water that comes. If the Nephilim were truly wiped out by the flood, then why do echoes of their story persist? Across continents, across millennia, across religions that never spoke to one another? The answer may lie in what occultists have long believed, that the Nephilim never truly vanished. Their physical forms may have perished, but their influence survived, encoded into the bones of civilization itself. Across the ancient world, we find traces of giant kings, divine rulers, and sacred bloodlines, from Egypt to Mesopotamia, from the Indus Valley to Mesoamerica. The pharaohs claimed descent from sky gods. The Sumerian kings listed impossibly long reigns. The Inca rulers were called children of the sun. What if these weren't metaphors? What if these dynasties were preserving a hybrid legacy? Some esoteric traditions speak openly of Nephilim bloodlines, continuing through history, hidden behind thrones and temples. The Merovingian kings of France, the Priory of Sion, even certain Templar legends whisper of a bloodline descended from the divine. A bloodline hunted, protected, and passed from generation to generation. Why such secrecy? Because this lineage was never meant to exist. It was born of celestial rebellion. If the truth were known, it might unravel everything we think we know about divine order, about power, about the human soul. This is where secret societies come in. From the Freemasons to the Rosicrucians, from mystery schools to occult lodges, many claim access to ancient knowledge, rituals, symbols, even relics that trace back to a time before the flood. Some even speak of guarding the remnants of Watcher teachings, the stars, the metals, the rituals of binding and summoning. Could these groups be preserving the legacy of the Nephilim? The symbols they use are suggestive. The all-seeing eye, the compass and square, the spiral, the serpent intertwined with the tree. These are not random. They are occult metaphors for power, transformation, and divine union. They may very well be the language of the Watchers, kept alive beneath the surface of civilization. Even more provocative is the belief that some individuals today carry remnants of Nephilim DNA, not enough to make them giants, but enough to give them heightened intellect, charisma, insight, or ambition. In this telling, they walk among us, politicians, artists, scientists, spiritual leaders, carrying a spark of something ancient and forgotten. This idea is echoed in modern storytelling. Think of the chosen one trope, the child of gods and mortals, the one born with unique gifts but a dangerous heritage. From Star Wars to Harry Potter, from Matrix to Game of Thrones, the Nephilim archetype keeps returning. It's as if we remember them subconsciously and keep writing them back into our world. But what if that memory is a warning? The Nephilim, in the occult view, were not just powerful, they were unstable, unnatural. Their very presence violated cosmic balance, and so those who descend from them, whether in blood or in knowledge, must walk a razor's edge. Too much light and they burn. Too much darkness and they consume. The societies that guard their secrets may not be trying to conquer the world. They may be trying to contain what should never be unleashed again, because the Nephilim were not just the offspring of gods and humans. They were the children of a broken law, and broken laws have a way of returning to be paid. For a story so ancient, the myth of the Nephilim feels oddly present. They're not just buried in dusty scrolls or locked away in esoteric libraries. They live quietly in the margins of our modern culture, in books, in films, in whispers and symbols, but also in something deeper, in fear, in fascination, in the instinctive feeling that some truths never really die, they just change shape. Some believe the Nephilim walk among us still, not as giants, but as echoes, shadows, their presence less physical, more symbolic. They emerge through modern archetypes, the chosen one, the hybrid child, the anomaly who carries both human flaws and supernatural potential. In science fiction, we call them mutants. In fantasy, we call them half-bloods. In conspiracy theory, we call them elites. In religion, we call them the Antichrist or the Messiah. The symbols change, but the story is the same. What if the Nephilim never left, but adapted? Look at popular culture. Films like Prometheus, The Matrix, Eternals, and Noah, the Darren Aronofsky version, all riff on the idea of divine human hybrids, ancient giants, and forbidden knowledge. These aren't coincidences. They are modern reanimations of a myth that refuses to stay buried. Even more chilling is the way some scientific pursuits seem to echo Watcher-like ambitions. Genetic engineering, human-animal hybrids, artificial intelligence, attempts to pierce the secrets of the cosmos. All technologies that promise evolution but whisper of hubris. In occult mythology, the mistake of the Watchers wasn't just lust, it was giving power to those not ready to wield it. And today, humanity plays with cosmic forces, editing DNA, creating synthetic life, building machines that think. Could we be repeating the same pattern? Some fringe theorists go further. They believe the Nephilim are real entities hiding in plain sight, manipulating global systems, guiding technology, or even shaping culture. They cite ancient bloodlines, secret families, even alien abduction stories as evidence that a hidden race still steers the human story. Are these claims true? Or are they modern mythology? From a symbolic standpoint, it hardly matters, because whether literal or metaphorical, the idea of the Nephilim reveals something deeply human. A fear of the unnatural, the uncontrollable, the hybrid. And also, strangely, a longing for connection to the divine, for power beyond limits, for meaning in a fractured world. In esoteric teachings, the Nephilim represent what happens when the sacred and the profane mix without balance. And that idea is more relevant now than ever. We live in a world of blurred lines, virtual and real, man and machine, nature and science. What we create now, we do not always understand. And in many ways, the myth of the Nephilim is not about the past. It is a mirror of our future, a warning. Because when humanity reaches beyond its station, whether through celestial love or technological ambition, the result is never neutral. It changes us, and it changes the world around us. The Nephilim may no longer roam the earth as giants, but their legacy survives in every attempt to ascend, every desire to become more than human, every dream that teeters on the edge of becoming a nightmare. And perhaps, in the silence between stars, they are waiting to return. The Nephilim are gone, or so we're told. The ancient flood came, and the Watchers were cast down. Their children, the giants, perished in the waves. Their names were scrubbed from sacred texts, their memories buried in apocrypha, sealed behind temple doors, smeared in the ink of heresy. But something this powerful never disappears. Not truly. It lingers, in shadows and bloodlines, in stories passed through fire and whisper. It hides beneath stone and symbol, embedded in architecture, ritual, and dream. What was once shouted from mountaintops now speaks in code, in scripture rewritten, in myths misremembered, in nightmares that feel too old to be personal. This is how the occult survives. In esoteric tradition, forgetting is never erasure. It is protection, a lock, not a loss. And the tale of the Nephilim is perhaps the greatest lock of all, a mystery built into the very fabric of religious history, a cosmic warning dressed as legend, a boundary once crossed that changed the course of creation. They were not just giants, not just monsters, not just mistakes. They were a mirror, held up to both heaven and earth, showing the cost of power, unbound by purpose. They were the union of glory and corruption, the offspring of longing, rebellion, and arrogance. And for a time, they ruled the world. Their punishment was absolute, but their legacy wasn't. Every time humanity seeks what it was told to avoid, whether knowledge, power, immortality, or godhood, the story of the Nephilim flickers back to life. It repeats, not identically, but thematically, because it's not about the past, it's about a pattern. One where the divine and mortal cross paths too closely, where curiosity becomes defiance, where creation outruns its creator. The Nephilim were born of a question: what if we could be more? And every generation since has asked the same. So what now? We live in an age of resurrection, of lost texts rediscovered, of secrets reinterpreted, of ancient patterns repeating themselves in science, politics, and spirit. The boundaries are thinner than ever. The myths are waking up. And somewhere, deep in the collective memory of humanity, the Nephilim stir. Perhaps they are waiting, or perhaps they were never really gone, just watching, like their fathers once did. And maybe, just maybe, our obsession with them isn't fear. Maybe it's recognition, because part of us remembers the fall, and part of us wants to fall again.